Every day there is a forgetting, and every moment there is the possibility of remembering who you truly are, awakening to your body, to the inner world and experience of being alive. Here is where you find the beauty, the joy. Here is where you free your soma.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Free Your Soma, Stories of Somatic Awakening and How to Live from the Inside Out. I have a very special guest. My dear friend, Krysta Kinslow, is here with me today, and we're going to talk about some really exciting stuff. Krysta Kinslow is an energy guide who works with Gene Key Wisdom. She helps people who are interested in human design and gene keys. Through these technologies, they learn to utilize these tools to shift patterns and frequencies in their lives. These patterns are the key to understanding themselves deeper and living with trust as they move through the world. So thank you for being here today, Krysta, to share with us.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Yeah. We've been kind of on this journey together, like through all this stuff. I think it was like, I don't know when it was exactly, sometime last year. I was like, hey, haven't you heard of like the Gene Keys? And then you're like, what? And then I knew you would, because I already knew about your work that you were doing prior to discovering, or working with the Gene Keys. I was like, this is like your thing. It's just the thing you didn't know that you like had yet, right?
Oh, I still remember that. We've done such amazing work together. I'm so happy that you have gravitated into my world and that we've done some somatics together and some actual coaching one-on-one together with my work. And then when you brought up the Gene Keys, I immediately went and bought that book and then just completely dove into it and absorbed all of it. It was like, oh my God, this is my life work. This is what I'm really good at. This is what comes intuitively. And I still to this day don't think I'll be able to ever thank you enough for introducing me to that.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. It felt so aligned because, in the work that you do, even pre-Gene Keys, it was all about recognizing our shadow, right? And the gift that's inside our shadow. And then they use the word siddhi in the Gene Keys. It's really like the illumination, right? Like the completion of that flowering of that gift, that comes from darkness, that comes from like the parts of ourselves that we think are bad or wrong or that we judge, that are really just part of our process, that are part of our frequency. Would you go into that a little bit about the shadow?
Absolutely. Yeah. If there's one thing that I've just kind of figured out in life and then I continue to observe and see how it kind of shows up around, it's that so much of our energy is made to feel wrong or like it shouldn't be there in some way. There should be some version of ourselves that knows better or that should be doing better, shouldn't be self-sabotaging, all of those things that kind of come up. But really, if we're able to kind of look at those energies and how they're showing up in our body and pay attention to how they feel, they're communicating to us. They're our best friend. They've got our interest in mind, and they're always giving us kind of a window into where our current state of consciousness is and where we want to move from that place. And so I really just get such a kick out of hearing about everybody's energies and the shadows that they're experiencing, the way that they see the world that feels painful and harmful and, all of the darkness that we have a hard time kind of really absorbing and pulling into our space and seeing what magic is there and what it's actually trying to show you and how it's working with you is kind of like your little best friend almost. And yeah, they do. They produce such a I think the way that you explained this to me was the shadow energy is kind of like the seed that you plant. And then the gift energy that comes from that shadow energy is like the flower that shows up. And then that seedy, that highest expression of that energy is the fruit that comes from it. And I remember that's how you kind of described it to me originally. And I've never really lost that. It is such a beautiful description of how so much of the energy in our life and the world around us shows up and moves.
Beautiful. Yes. I mean, when we first started working together, I think that, you talked about it in terms of like our triggers and how like our triggers are actually showing us where we have pain that we're holding or where we have fear or anxiety or however it's showing up or where we have unhealed stuff inside of us. And instead of like kind of just wanting to get rid of them, how do we actually go like kind of into them more to see what they have to say, right?
Yeah, it's so fascinating because even the word trigger feels a little harsh now that I kind of understand the energy a little bit more. That word was what I used to use all the time because I didn't have a different expression of it. And now it's something that is it's kind of this like very subtle energy, I feel like, that shows up in your body. And I'm so excited that this connects into somatic so beautifully. It's this very subtle energy that kind of starts to show up in your body. And the more that it gets ignored or pushed away or tried to get fixed, there's a lot of energy that's like, well, as soon as I fix this, I'll feel better and I'll be this version of myself that, X, Y, and Z. And so the more that it tries to get overcome or fixed or get to the other side of, it just gets bigger and louder, and it shows up even stronger in our body because our body is trying to navigate and show us what's going on within ourselves. And so the way that I kind of look at it now is it's an energy that's, yes, it can be described as a trigger, but it's something that gets your attention. It's something that's so powerful, and it wants you to pull it in, and it wants you to hold it and embrace it and love it and figure out why it's there and why you've created that energy in the first place and why you're ready to actually shift it. So I think that there's so much there about when you hear the word trigger, it's so easy to be like, oh, triggers are bad. And like, yeah, you have to figure out a way to be with them because they kind of suck. But really, it's kind of shifting from that momentum into something that's so much more loving and is so much more, this is an energy that's in my body that's just trying to get my attention because it cares about me and it loves me and it wants me to evolve. It wants me to get bigger in my energy.
I love that. And, that speaks to your own refinement in your process, that you're like changing, because I think that happens, and when I think about the word trigger itself, makes me think of like a gun. It makes me
like not a bad word, but yeah.
Like it's just, but it has this like real like strong energy to it. And what I'm thinking about is just the way in which, like, when we start that process of, instead of just like trying to get away from the things that make us uncomfortable, when we start a practice of actually like acknowledging them and getting closer to them, what we notice is, I mean, you can speak to this too, is like that our body sends us tons of little signals and smaller, gentler information before we're at the trigger point, before we're at the point where it's like, oh, I can't handle it anymore. Oh, I'm having pain or whatever it is. There's like 1,000 tiny little signals that our body's sending us. And it's when we start like going towards the shadow instead of pulling away from it, that we can actually notice those signals before we get to that trigger point, so to speak.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like that's so well worded. I had such a rush of energy as soon as you said that. But yeah, it's like your world is communicating with you in every possible moment of every single day. And when you're on autopilot, it's very easy to ignore all of those subtle energy shifts, even within your body, which I know you can speak so much to. And I'm very excited to get into this from this perspective. But every single time your body is in a moment, it's showing you where you're at, how you feel about something, like what your relationship is to it, because it's all about relationship. And so when the trigger comes up, that really big energy where you're like, oh God, this is so overwhelming. It's basically like, I know, but you weren't really listening on any of these other points, but I've got you. This is going to be really good. You're going to hear it this time. It's such a different kind of energy now. And the refinement of it, I think, just comes from the gentleness through which I see this process now, because it doesn't feel gentle when you're in it and when you're in a trigger and everything is going, what seems to be against you in some kind of way. It doesn't feel gentle. And it's also okay for it to not feel gentle when it's happening. I think that's kind of the point of it.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, there's going to be times when you don't feel like, and maybe you can speak to this too, like part of being in the shadow is like we sometimes can't even fully like see that we're in it. We're so in it that we don't like, there's not that perspective. And so lost and allowing ourselves to be lost for a minute and to be a little disoriented can be part of the process, right? To not know and to not have a pathway through, but to get stuck there is, I think, what most of us fear and what we don't want. And that's what's so beautiful about having tools like the Gene Keys or a template like that to be able to kind of bring us out of that stuckness, and I feel that you're incredible at doing that, like with your clients, as I've been one of your clients. We're in that stuckness, when we're in that disorientation, lost in our shadow, how can we start to see through what the shadow is presenting immediately to like the deeper parts of it that offer wisdom, that offer like a way through, right?
Yeah, totally. I think that it's really interesting. I love the piece that you just said because it reminded me of this. It's the fourth shadow energy, which is intolerance, which is essentially, we are all so trained to try to find answers in our mind constantly, to have all the answers be presented to us, to know which way we're going to go at any given time, to know how any and everything is going to turn out around us. Our mind has been trained to lead and to find those answers. And when we feel intolerance, that shadow energy of that, we can't really tolerate something, it feels like it's too much. That's when we're a little bit scared to let go of that control in our mind. And we go even deeper into our mind to try to analyze everything and, analyze everybody's behavior around us. And meanwhile, our body is responding to all of that and it feels so unsafe. And it starts to kind of chalk up into this like, oh God, this is too much. I can't really feel this because it's responding to the energy within our mind so much of the time. And it's trying to let us know, hey, this feels like this. Maybe pay attention to that. But if we're so scared to go into our bodies, which is such a beautiful momentum of when you and I started to do your work together. It was the more that I could go into my body and create kind of this safe space for that vulnerability to be there, the more I could be with that intolerance and kind of lead to that gift of understanding of what's happening. I gave it space to be because I had that space within my body a little bit more. And I know you'll touch on this as well too about how that shows up, but it reminded me of in the shadow of intolerance, it basically says, there's no real way out of it other than to exhaust yourself with trying to finding answers. Try to find all the answers. And when you finally recognize that there's no answers that are so concrete that they won't lead to more questions, your brain kind of finally exhausts itself. And it's like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. I just have to kind of surrender into this and surrender into my body on such a deep level.
Yes. And that can be such a painful thing to kind of get to that point of exhaustion, but there's a beauty to it because it's basically like surrendering. It's saying like, I can't figure this out and I'm going to have to just let my humanness like process this, like my body, like the time that passes because my mind cannot do this like completely. It has to be a bigger than my mind process. It has to be a full body process. And, dropping out of the mental, and this is what I think is so interesting about human design and gene keys is I feel that they're really meant to be like living knowledge. It's, the human design structure itself is a map of your body. It's a map of your aura. It has the like energy coming down, through the crown, and it has the pressure coming up through the root. And it has these energy centers that are a depiction of the energy that moves in our bodies. And so to me, like when I started really understanding what somatics even is, because I didn't even know really what it was when I went to my somatics training, and I started like realizing, I'm like, oh, this is like actually fitting really perfectly with human design. This actually correlates really well with gene keys because I feel like it's telling us about our experience that is physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And it's all of that all the time. And maybe we can only tap into one layer, or maybe there's certain layers that we're more comfortable in than others, and for people who are listening who don't know a whole lot about like, human design, for example, like there's going to be different ways that your energy moves that's unique to you. Just like with the gene keys, there's different configurations that are unique to you. But when you look at like the bigger picture of it, it's all us, right? Can you tell us a little bit about like when you started learning about these systems, what really clicked for you? What really was like the moment where you're like, this makes sense on like a body level to me?
I think the biggest thing that really clicked into place for me was, oh God, first off, I feel like you described human design so beautifully and the energy of it. It is such a powerful tool and it shows you where your specific energy moves, how it interacts with the world, how you make decisions, how how you take in other people's energy into your system, where certain energies connect in with certain energies of other people and creates kind of this energetic surge between the both of you, why we seek out certain kinds of relationships and how they kind of complement where we are and how we complement the other person. And the thing that really stood out to me with human design was actually learning what my human design type was. And we've had so many conversations around this, but figuring out that I'm a projector in a world that's dominated by energy types and by sacral energy types who have the energy to master and move things. And figuring out I was projector and that I move at a different pace and that my work days are going to look different than a lot of people around me. The amount of rest and play that I need is going to look so different than how anybody else moves around me. The amount of time that I need to myself to be able to kind of release the energy that I'm taking in as a projector, that was such a game changer to me and gave me exactly what I needed as I discovered it. And now what's really interesting is, and the reason I've started to slide a little bit more into gene key wisdom over human design. I love human design. I think it gives a beautiful template for how to apply the gene key wisdom, of course, because I know that it comes from there. Is human design and gene key wisdom are such beautiful tools that aren't actually ever supposed to limit you in any kind of a way. And so what I really love about human design is how much information it gave me. And then it kind of boosted me into this place to then take it into my own hands of, just because I'm a projector does not mean I have limited energy. It means that I need to become more efficient with how I utilize my energy. And on some of my best days, I probably have more energy than a generator does a lot of the time. And so I used all of these tools to kind of figure out the full picture of who I feel like I am. And then I decided my truth from a lot of those spaces. And what's really interesting is I think when I found human design and gene key wisdom, I was in a place of looking for answers because I felt so broken about myself, because I felt like something was wrong with me. And the way that I've moved into the coaching world, seeing everybody else kind of take off around me. And meanwhile, I'm kind of like, I don't have the energy for any of this. This feels like a lot. I just want to coach maybe one or two people a week and see where I go from there. And so I was looking for so many answers, which I did find, but then they led to more questions. And I could feel where I started to limit myself with these answers. And so long, short story, very long around way to get there. I think that human design is a beautiful tool to access parts of yourself that maybe you haven't really ever had validated before. And then it kind of moves you into this place of empowerment of exactly what do you want to do with that information and how do you want to view it, because your perspective on it is what's going to shift the way that you move through the rest of the world, just like anything.
Yes, I think that's an important thing to bring up, because a lot of times with like with most systems or even religions or practices, there's a tendency to get dogmatic about
Yes. Yeah.
You do that, like you said, it limits us. And that's the moment where I think you lose people, because people don't want to be limited. They don't want to be told they're this or they're that, and that means this about them, right? So I think that in the way that you've described it, like understanding your energy and having certain things about you validated is precious, wonderful. And now that you understand the mechanics of what's going on, how can you work with that to just do whatever it is that you want to do? That it's not about those things, those mechanics limit you. Those mechanics are part of how you can utilize your full self.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And I think that's why I tend to lean towards gene key wisdom, is because yes, we all have certain gates and channels that reflect kind of our superpowers, but we all carry all the energies of these at any given point, whether, we're stronger in it or more conditioned in it or whatever it might be. It's a universal language that everyone understands. Everyone understands what the shadow energies are, how they move through our system. It gives the language to the energies that we always feel, but we don't really have the capacity to articulate what it is. And so I love that it speaks to everybody kind of on a global level. There's no, you feel this way because you're a projector. You only feel this way because you're a generator. That doesn't really land for how I love to speak to it. It's just, tell me about your world. Oh, I hear this energy. I wonder if it's bringing out something like this. And that's what I love, is that it's so expansive and so free to kind of go into the gene key wisdom part of it for me.
Beautiful. Yes. And can you give us let's get an example for the listeners who might be new to gene keys. Take us through like a shadow, a gift, and a CD, maybe one of your favorite ones or one of the ones you've worked with a lot in yourself or someone else.
Yeah, I completely will. I'm going to start with the first one. I love the first one and the energy of entropy, the shadow energy of it, where we have almost this chemical way where we'll just wake up and be in a bad mood. We'll feel really low. We'll feel really down about ourselves. And a lot of us try to energetically find out why or what could have caused it, or why am I here? I felt so good yesterday. I felt so confident about everything. And now I've just hit this very low energetic state and I don't know why. And it can really turn into, what is it? Yeah. The repressive state is depressive of the energy. And then the reactive state of the shadow energy is basically frenetic. So you either really drop down low into a depressive state, or you're almost going to hit this energy of you feel the need to withdraw and not be around anyone, but yet you're constantly reaching out to more and more people. You're trying to do more and more things to kind of avoid the way that you're feeling in some way. And before, whenever I would hit those really low states, it was like this, oh, I got to figure out how to get myself back out. I don't have time to feel this way. I've got a business to run. I have to show up in my most powerful energy. How can I be powerful in this state right now and show everybody that I can do this? it's almost kind of like the shadow energy comes on of you need to be in this lower state for a little while to let your body kind of chemically move through it. But because you're so busy trying to get to the other side of it or try to fix it or figure out that there's something wrong with you or broken with you, if you interrupt that very natural chemical sequence in your body, then it almost compacts it into an even bigger and an even louder version of that. And then you're kind of just running on this very empty tank because you're not allowing yourself, kind of like a fire in the embers, to just kind of chill and let yourself kind of seed the new creative spark that's going to come from it. So the best example that I have of this is one day I just woke up and everything was so great all week. I'd been connecting. Everything had been so beautiful. New clients were coming into me without even me doing anything, the open invitation thing from being a projector. And then one day I just woke up and I just could not even move from bed. I was like, I don't want to do anything. I hate the world. I don't want to be eating. I don't want to be talking to anybody. I don't want anything to do with anything. I don't want to connect. And I just woke up and told my partner at the time, was just like, hey, there is absolutely nothing wrong between us. Everything is okay. I don't know why I'm feeling this way, but I'm going to go retreat for the rest of the day. I've canceled all of my plans. I've moved my clients to the following day. I don't know what's going on. I just need to be. And I just let myself be in that. And then naturally, it kind of started to dissolve. And it was weird because then I actually felt myself pulled into the Gene Key book. And I flipped right to the first page and was like, oh my God, this is everything. And basically what I kind of learned by letting myself just naturally be in that without judging it, without feeling like something was wrong with me, but just like, okay, I guess this is just where I am. I'm going to take really good care of myself and be grumpy. And I'm going to drink my delicious coffee drink and all of that. And what happens is when you let that move, the gift of freshness comes out. It's such a beautiful gift of, it's not just a new creative energy. It's kind of like this energy that's alive, that needs to come from this place of kind of like the embers of a fire. And then you relight that fire. And all of a sudden you have this magnetic warmth that you go into the world with, that you're like, I see things differently. And I feel this like spark. It's the archetype for it is literally called the spark. And you spread this warmth to everybody around you. And then when that's done and you've spread your warmth, you go right back down into an entropy phase again, because you need to kind of rekindle those little embers, and you need to rebase yourself. You need to get back to your own energy. And then that spark comes up again. And basically what this cycle then sparks is the seed of beauty, which is, you don't really see any part of your world as being more beautiful than another. Every part just works together so gorgeously. Even your low states, they spark the beautiful high states. Your high states spark the beautiful low states, and you get exactly what you need from all of that at any given point. And it gives space around you for the people around you to get everything that they need at any given point. Because you also can't be this warm, beautiful spark for everyone around you 24/7. That's not how that works. So it's this gorgeous cycle of noticing that the shadow energy is not something to get away from. It actually gives you this beautiful seedy energy of beauty for the world. And then that also then sparks the entropy again. So it's just this gorgeous cycle of seeing how your shadow energies actually complement and deepen the gift energies and vice versa.
Wow. I love that example because I can super relate to it in terms of like the days, like I've had days where, I just basically want to lay down all day in bed and I don't even want to look at my phone. And like, I'm like, oh God, I have to respond to a client. Like, can I wait till tomorrow? I probably can. And I've learned to do that because what used to be the case is like, I would try to go around and fix it in some way.
Yeah.
I like, I'm feeling bad because I'm like not making enough money. Maybe I should text that person back who was interested in working with me. Am I feeling bad because like, maybe I don't feel beautiful enough. Maybe I should go out and buy some beauty products or, go get my hair cut, go do something, to try to fix this problem of like this low state that I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And what you're describing just really, it feels so wonderful to hear you talk about it like this, because there's so much in our culture and in our world that will have you pathologize, label, and basically conclude your natural state of like, I don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
And tell ourselves we're depressed. We'll start to tell ourselves, that something's wrong with us. We'll start to tell ourselves that, it's because we don't have X, Y, or Z, that we need a new relationship or that we need a new this or new that. And it's not that those things aren't real, that's not sometimes true that we, need things. But sometimes what's true is we're just feeling this lowness. We're just feeling this like entropy, this like, grumpiness. And can we let ourselves feel that without trying to draw a conclusion? And that can be a really hard thing in the beginning because we're so programmed, like I said, by our culture to pathologize and to label and to go seek a thing, whatever it is, to make that feeling go away.
What's even so cool to like kind of build off of what you just said is that the entropy is kind of, I think I heard it referred to at some point as almost like a fertile state of awareness. Like it's not that you're not feeling anything, it's that you're so deeply aware of everything that's happening that your body almost kind of goes into this numbness. And we think of numbness as like, I'm checked out, I can't handle my life, something is wrong. But really, it's giving you this gift of like, you're going to create something from here. Just get into this numbness. Notice everything so deeply and so intimately because you're not checked out. You're so deeply aware of everything that's happening. So if there are some things that need to shift, and if there is a relationship problem or something that you need to resolve in some kind of a way, it actually gives you the superpower to be able to see it from a different light, where you're not always busy and moving and in this very high state of energy. You're in a lower state of energy. It's a gift to have that very deep awareness kind of given to you. But if you're so busy, like you said, trying to fix it or trying to distract yourself from it or trying to move through it because something is wrong, or you think that you need to connect deeper because you're removing yourself because there's some sort of self-sabotaging pattern, whatever the story is, you're removing yourself from this very fertile state of awareness that's actually gifting you something to then bring this freshness back into your world that's going to wake you up and it's going to wake up everybody around you.
Yes. And also speaking again to, and you can definitely relate to this as a projector, but I think any person or any energy type can relate to this. There's a certain level of exhaustion that comes with being on all the time, that comes with being, doing, going, being that light, being, and sometimes we just are exhausted and we're asking ourselves like, why am I not up? I was just up yesterday. I was just, I felt like this powerful, like powerhouse of a person who could do anything. Like, why am I feeling so low? It's like, girl, your batteries need to be charged. Like, yeah, like it's like your body can't do that ongoing forever. It's just not sustainable. But again, like we get this message from our world, even just with the way that there are lights on all night long in a city, that we're supposed to be on all the time. And I think more and more of us are realizing that we're really not built that way.
Yeah. And especially because I kind of feel like there's some part of it where coming into a leadership role where people look to you to have the answers sometimes, or to have the wisdom, or to share where they are because you're such a good listening place for them, or, you holding people with their energy, with their bodies so beautifully. It's almost kind of like, well, if I don't have that, then who am I? And it's like, you have to pull back and withdraw so that you can understand who you are, even amidst all of that, because it's not even about what you're doing or how you're showing up in the world. It's simply about, who are you? Who are you being? Who can you be when you're low right now? Can you pull back from everyone and still validate yourself? Can you still feel very special and beautiful, even if you don't have the positive energy that's thinking that the world is this beautiful, shining place that's going to always be okay? It's okay to not want to get out of your bed and to be grumpy and to be like, all I want is my coffee and my TV show right now. Like, give yourself that, especially because so many of us are moving into a place of service for the rest of the world. That is exhausting. And it's okay that it's exhausting, and it's okay that it lights you up when it does, but let yourself feel that entropy. Let yourself pull back to understand who you are amidst all of that. And it's just, there's such a gift in that, I feel like, especially if you're a leader and somebody that people look to.
Totally. And I think as you start to like work with these energies, allowing yourself to be low, allowing yourself to be in the shadow, right? Then it's sort of, you notice the cycling through, you notice the illumination, you notice like that beauty starting to pour out. And can you talk a little bit about how it feels like when we go from that lower frequency to like that high frequency on a physical level? It can be kind of uncomfortable actually to suddenly be in this really high frequency energy. How does that play a part in this cycle that we're talking about?
Oh my God, this makes me laugh every time I think about it because, and this is also where your somatics came in. So I told you about this right before we hopped on this call. I also experienced kind of this very high frequency shift this weekend that was absolutely intense and up-leveled me on, I don't even know how many levels right now because it hasn't even fully sank in. And my body went into this state of panic because it's not used to holding those higher frequencies. right? When we kind of integrate new high frequencies, that's why we have an integration period, because we have to get used to what they feel like in your system. And if you're scared of your body, you're scared of the intensity that they feel, it almost gives me the same when I'm integrating higher frequencies and letting them kind of evolve in my body. It gives me the same feeling as I would get as if something traumatic was happening to me. It's almost kind of like that trigger feeling comes up, but because I know what it is, it's then like, this is a higher frequency that my body isn't used to. So I let myself go into the entropy. I tend to, and this is in so much better control than it was when I was younger because I didn't understand this, but I tend to want all kinds of snacks. I want very deep, heavy comfort food because I almost need to lower my body energy again to something that's more comfortable in a way. And then the higher frequencies can kind of integrate and make their way through it. So I do it in little bits of phases where I'm super aware of it because it feels very vulnerable for these higher frequencies to move through your body. We're so used to shadow energies and we are so used to how trauma feels that that's not something that we have a hard time really holding. We have a hard time processing it because when those higher frequencies start to make your way through your system, they are wildly uncomfortable. And I kind of feel like, and that might be a little bit of a point that's some people might not agree with, but I think that I was thinking about our work together that you've done with me with somatics, of just allowing my body to have a little bit of room to breathe where it would naturally tighten. And that's what it feels like. When you have a higher frequency that's coming through your body, your instinct is to kind of tighten around it and constrict and almost like push it away. But it's figuring out how to allow that vulnerability be there and how to soften into how intense it feels, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
A fascinating process.
We tend to think of like, high vibe things as being these like things that are going to feel good. But what you're describing is like, sometimes they don't feel good. Let's take like a really difficult relationship in your life and there's some challenge going on. Like I'm just imagining like times I've had with like friends of mine where we're in some kind of conflict and, harsh words have been spoken. And there's a part of me that rises up in that process and sees the bigger picture, right? And see my own like part that I'm playing in this, and kind of gets macro for a moment and sees them. And there's a part of me that just has this intense, beautiful, loving compassion for both of us in this pain that we're in together. That is not necessarily beautiful in its feeling or comfortable. It is beautiful, but it's also like scary and
comfortable. I feel like that's such a good way of saying that. It's uncomfortable.
There's a part of me that like just doesn't want to have that full macro perspective because there's a part of me that still wants to hold on to like my story and my position and me being right and them being wrong and my hurt and my upset. While simultaneously there's this like deep, powerful, like loving kindness energy that is coming through my system that's not actually at odds with any of that. But it can feel that way because what I'm wanting to go towards, what I'm used to is that feeling of being resentful, of being angry, and I can be all of that and allow this new frequency to kind of wash over the whole situation. But that scenario is not pleasant, even though it's definitely high vibe. It is not a pleasant it is because it's high vibe involving all the layers of our not just exclusively high vibe, not just bliss. It's bliss with all of everything in there.
I remember too. So it's really interesting because the more, high vibe or the more that I allow my frequency to raise, I realize how complex our human experience is because you're right. Sometimes there's a part that just wants to be petty and it wants to just embody who you've always been because you're like, this sucks. I don't like this. I hate this. And I want to have my story and I want to victimize myself. I want them to be the bully. That lets me off the hook a little bit. And as you start to, whatever example we want to use, and as you start to kind of guide into this, like, ooh, but this is who I feel I want to grow into. Oh, yep, I can see why this is showing me it like this. Oh God, yep, I'm aware of it. And then for me, there's always this little bit of bitterness that comes of like, of course, yep, that makes perfect sense. Of course, this is showing up in this way. I don't like it. I'm here for it. Oh God. And it almost becomes like this very complex sensation of you don't like what's happening because it's uncomfortable and it's messy and it's painful. But you have this little bit of joy that's just in the background of like, yeah, I see it. I see it. This is really fun. Oh, I don't like this, but I also see it and it's really fun. And it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, I think from Neil Donald Walsh, who's like, you could have your pain with a little bit of joy too. that's what this creates, is it's this expansive array of so many different emotions and truths, and they all have validity, and they all kind of represent the same thing to some degree from a different perspective. And it's uncomfortable when those higher frequencies come in, which is why a lot of us are scared to let them in. And our body also has to be able to handle when those higher frequencies are coming in. And if you haven't done the work to allow your body to kind of catch up to those higher frequencies, it's going to be hard to embody them. It's going to be hard for them to stay around for long. It's going to be hard for you to fully integrate what that experience was showing you. There has to be safety within the body for this to be able to happen.
Absolutely. And I think that, when you mentioned this before with like the snacking or with food is a really simple, quick, very animalistic way that we can feel safe. Use food to create like safety in our bodies. And there comes like, a personal time in our lives where we might recognize that. We recognize the relationship between like our stress and what we're choosing to consume, how whatever it is we're choosing to consume either like increases our stress or decreases our stress. And kind of what it comes down to in the scenario that you played out is like, we're going back to something familiar. We're going back to a feeling of security and safety and what's familiar. And for you, those might be certain types of foods. For someone with a completely different like cultural background, it might be totally different foods that they are drawn to. But what we end up doing a lot in our, kind of body-centric, like in a weird way, we're like a very body-centric culture, but like mostly a surface body-centric culture. Like people are really concerned with their physical appearance and how they look, but they're not necessarily looking at like how they feel, and how functional they are and all this stuff. But you can kind of get into this place where you're like, oh, like, why am I doing this to myself? Like I'm sitting here like, stress eating or like emotional eating. And like, it's the how. It's like we can do that and be like stuffing our feelings down with the food. Or we can do that and go like, wow, look at me. I'm like trying to comfort myself right now because I don't feel good. Or I'm enjoying something. I'm having some pleasure because like things are really hard right now. And I'm looking to balance that out. Like there's just different ways that we can look at how we're doing something. Right.
Yeah.
And then more than that, connect with the impact of that. Like when we're snacking, there's probably going to come a point where we either overdo it or we stop ourselves before we overdo it. And it's not like bad things to necessarily overdo.
Yeah.
You feel it. You feel the impact of like overdoing it a little bit, and now your stomach hurts or it's like a little harder to fall asleep or something. You know what I mean? And just feeling that impact and being like, oh, that was a little too far. Feel that. The next time when you're in it, like you have a different experience. You like don't overdo it quite in the same way. Right.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Right. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like the dance of like, wow, it's or you back off a little bit in that dance.
Yeah, it's so funny that you mentioned that because that was where I was last night, was this like very interesting dance of, so just to kind of preface this, I feel like the reason to do this kind of work, to understand these energies, is because it kind of pulls the whole, there's a right way to be, there's a wrong way to be, this is bad, this is good, this is, this shouldn't be how I'm doing this, because we tend to beat up on ourselves so much of you're experiencing this big flush of up-leveling. The higher frequencies feel deeply uncomfortable in your body. You might gravitate towards food like I do. I love foods. I love snacks. I love like heavy comfort food when I want them. But before, that used to be a really shameful process of like, God, I can't even handle when this stuff happens to me. And now look at me just eating, like, obviously this food is not good for me, There would be this whole story around it. So because I've had so much experience around this work, and it's always evolving and it's always getting more complex and more humbling, and you always hear this, but the more you find out, the more you're like, oh my God, I don't know anything. But what I will say is it's generated this deep curiosity about myself of, okay, I can feel that I'm gravitating towards snacky foods right now. That's okay. I'm going to let myself be there for a little while. I think I need that. Oh, I don't want to I've been doing jujitsu. I don't want to go to my jujitsu class tonight. And then Tuesday came and I was like, I don't want to go to my jujitsu class tonight. And I go 4 or 5 times a week. So my body is used to moving in that way right now. And it feels amazing. I did not want to do that. And I wanted to eat a little bit more. And so by the time Tuesday night rolled around, actually last night, I was trying to think of what day it was. It was hilarious because if I had spent so much time judging myself for that and feeling so much shame around it and like I shouldn't be like this or I shouldn't be that, I would have completely missed the energy behind it, which was I wanted to overeat just a little bit more for comfort. I wanted to lower the density of my body a little bit differently, and I don't want to move it. All of these were very subconscious, but also conscious at the same time. I didn't want to move my body, and instead it brought me to a rush of tears and emotion that needed to come out of my body that I didn't want to just move through and I didn't want to just ignore, but that was how I set up my space to be able to release it in that powerful way. And then today, again, on the other side of entropy, because I allowed myself to be with it so deeply, it's like, oh my God, I'm so excited for today. I can't wait to go to my class tonight. Oh, I want to eat all the vegetables today. I do not want anything snacky anymore. And it's like we go through these natural cycles that if we just trusted the integration waves of how we move and what happens when we hit a low point and how we come back up again and then we hit another low point, and you get to know yourself out of curiosity rather than who you think you should be, it opens up so much wisdom and magic of how you're actually operating, because we are all so freaking magical. We're just not paying attention because we're so busy looking at how everyone else is moving and how we think we should be. So it really opens up a lot when you can just play with that dance and see what you naturally want to do at any given point, and if it serves you, and if not, you'll pivot and shift into something that does.
Yes. And I think that was a big turning point for me with my body practices, was to not be so compulsive or demanding of myself that, and because I think a lot of us have been programmed, especially with regards to like eating and physical activity, that we need to create like rules and have discipline and like do things a certain way in order to avoid things like, gaining a lot of weight or, having physical issues of some kind, or like whatever it is that we think is going to happen if we just like let ourselves be in that state. And maybe we're living with like experiences that are, a good reason why we're afraid of that. Maybe we've had health problems in the past or weight problems.
Totally.
Maybe that's still going on to some capacity for people. And so there's reasons why they have this caution, or they think that, they just got to get really disciplined and like make themselves do things. And for sure, there could even be like a time and a place for that. But what I hear from you and what I really feel like with the gene keys and human design is like, how can we make that like a more easeful process? How can we make that more like
gentle?
Yeah, gentle and less severe, and maybe there are going to be times when like, you're just like, oh, I just want to lay here in bed and not do anything. And then there's a little voice in the back of your head that's like, no, you do want to get up. There's something out there for you. And getting up and doing something's going to be the thing. And then other times, like you said, that heaviness is really necessary, and just letting yourself sink deeper in the bed is going to be the thing. But like, how do we create like that flexibility and that awareness to start like moment to moment paying attention to what our body, what our beingness is really asking for, and listening to that over just like whatever we think, like you just said before, what we're programmed to think we need to do or how we should be doing things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of feel like this ties in so beautifully with somatics, because when you start to get, and you can speak to this so much better than I can, which I would love to hear right now, and how this shows up for you. But when you start to pay attention to these little ways that your body wants to move and that it's speaking to you and communicating with you, it develops this very deep-seated trust, so that when you are vulnerable, when things do feel really heightened, when you do start to question whether or not you're in a self-sabotaging method or if you're actually just needing to be there, you have such a deep-seated trust for your body's wisdom that you're like, you'll speak to me if something is off, and I know that. So like you said, maybe you do tend to overeat, but you don't eat as much next time, or you catch yourself before it gets to that point because you know what it feels like. And that's exactly where I caught it yesterday, because I know what it feels like to almost eat so much that it makes me sick. And instead it was like, oop, I've had just one too many now and I'm good. I don't need that anymore. I feel how it served me and I'm going to back off now because it does not feel good any longer. You develop this deep communication with your body where it literally has your back at any given moment if you can pay attention and hear it.
Yes. I mean, that's been a huge thing for me, is just knowing where those boundaries are in my body that become actions. And I think that's, with Hannah Somatic specifically, and because there's so many different kinds of somatic practices, but working with these little micro movements and doing like just enough movement that you can feel what's going on and then letting it go and letting your body relax has been so powerful for building that capacity to kind of modulate, to be like, I'm going to do this much instead of, a lot of us, we know on and we know off, right? But how do we turn the dimmer down? How do we start to like modulate our energy where it's like, okay, well, I'm going to give just this much. I'm going to give just that much. Okay, I'm going to let it off just this much and start to play with that dimmer. And that's really what we do on a physiological level with somatics. And I love how you're seeing how this translates to other actions that you're taking, how much you're consuming of your snacky food when you're in that snacky place, whether you're going to sink deeper into the bed or whether you're going to come out a little bit, and that we don't have to be on or off. We can be somewhere in that middle place. We can be in the middle, right? We can start to live there.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like that's so well said, because there is something to be said about our hustle culture. That's like, if you're not going 110%, what are you even doing? And it's like, well, sometimes I'm just kind of at this nice little like 5% or maybe like 2%. And that feels great, because that's what I need. I need to know what that feels like when I'm in that place, just as much as when I'm going hard or not going whatsoever at all. Like, there is so much. I feel like this speaks to energy so beautifully, because there's no black or white energy. There's no being on and being off. There's so much in between that we're missing out on and that we're not paying attention to. And all of those little tiny, just like somatics, those little tiny micro movements and those little tiny micro moments throughout your days are all guiding you at any given points. And it's just I just love the way that you phrase that about like, it's not being totally on and it's not being totally off. There is a nice little in between that's giving you information as well.
Yeah. And to feel like we have that sense of control that you're describing, because I think that a lot of people who might be listening are like, well, I want that kind of control to be able to stop, because I usually don't stop until my stomach hurts, because I've been there too, right? Like that is a thing. And, the best thing that helped me was just getting in touch with that feeling, the feeling of overdoing it, the feeling of getting too far. And we could bring this back to what we were describing before, when your energy's really up and you're go, 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 go. Maybe we go too far, and that's part of the needing to rest extra, in a bad mood the next day, because we went a little too far. So get in touch with that impact. Let yourself feel that entropy, that like darkness, because you're going to remember how that feels. The next time that you're on a high streak, you can go, oh yeah, I remember that was followed by this like dip down low, so you don't have to be so afraid of it.
Yeah. And to really tie in somatics just a little bit more, it's so beautiful that it's in your body. It is your body. It's these little tiny micro moments where, kind of to round back out to our very beginning of our conversation around triggers, the triggers show up when you haven't heard the rest of the little tiny markers that were trying to get you to that point. Then all of a sudden somebody confronts you and you're like, this is awful. I don't like this at all. Where did this even come from? And it's like, oh no, it was there. It's been there. And your body's been trying to communicate with you. Just like sometimes you might be on autopilot and you eat, and then all of a sudden you're really sick and you're like, how did it even get to this spot? I don't even know how it would have caught myself. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with getting to that point. It's just trying to get your attention a little bit louder. And then it sets you up to pay more attention to all these little tiny micro moments where, are you naturally gravitating towards more snacky things quite a bit right now? And what's the reason for that? Is it something that you're doing that feels really good? Or does it feel like it's getting past a point where it feels good and is more of a clutch, or a crutch? It's just, there's so much feedback in any given moment of all of our lives, and it happens within our body. It doesn't happen within our mind, because our mind is only here to digest and to translate and communicate information back to us. So when we try to find all these answers through our mind, or try to say, why am I having a bad day? Or why am I overeating? Or, whatever it might be, it just allows our mind to run and run and run, and to get less in touch with our body. Whereas our body is showing us at any given moment what we need and how to hold it and how to relax it a little bit more, how to be vulnerable, how to integrate energies. It's such a powerful vehicle for our expansion.
Perfectly said. I mean, the way that our body communicates is subtle. Our mind, which is loud.
Yeah.
And so becoming more in your body is actually kind of a subtle experience. Once you're there, often it's not going to be as loud as your mind. And, coming back to that idea of like, a trigger, we could even translate this to like the clients I work with who have these ongoing pain in their body, like their lower back is in pain or their neck is in pain, right? And it's like, it's been going on. And then it got to that point, right? When people start to unwind that, and you probably went through this too, is like, as the pain in your back or your shoulder starts to diminish and go away, now you can feel when it's coming back. You can feel like, oh, my back is starting to get tight. It doesn't hurt yet, but it's starting to get tight. And you can take action to do something to help your back relax before it gets to that point where you're in pain, right?
Yeah.
It's this process of like slowing down, because we're not going to notice if we're just speeding around driven by our mind. We're not going to notice until our body is screaming, right? Until our mind is screaming, until we're really upset, right, about something. But there's been this process, this unconscious, nudging of our body, of our being this whole time. So kind of to bring everything together here with like the way that, you illustrated so beautifully the way that gene keys can show up in our everyday experience in our body. There's 64 of these, and we are all of them, right? Right? But we all have this specific sequence. Do you use that sequence when you like work with people? Do you look at their particular sequence, or do you use them more like an oracle and draw from whatever's showing up? I'm just curious whether you like kind of take it as a blueprint or whether you really just use it in this more creative way.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I like the sequences. I do. I love them, and I have utilized them with people. But what I've actually come to realize is that even if they have a certain sequence, so here's where it gets just a little bit complex. And here's where I love almost kind of using it as more as an oracle in a sense, because every single energy also, or every single gene key also has a programming partner. And then not only that, but they make up codon rings of basically like our DNA structures. So where one is showing up, it's actually impacting how another one is going to show up, which might also be impacting 2 or 3 more. And so when I start to pick up on an energy that's showing up, because I don't like to just spew information at people being like, this is what you have. And this, because I've done that to myself and I've been like, I don't know what to do with any of this. I absorb the information and then I'm like, cool, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to integrate this. So I love utilizing where a person is in a real life coaching session. And then when I pick up on certain energies, I'm like, ooh, I wonder if they have this in their gates. And I'll go look at their chart really quickly. I'm like, okay, I do see this. Or, oh, they actually have the programming partner that's showing up in this way, which is also conditioning them within this one as well too. Or, ooh, these ones are grouped together as little codon rings. So I love utilizing it as almost like a little roadmap of what do I hear? And then how can I bring that energy back in with the person so that then they can integrate it and be like, oh, this is what this is. So like going back to our entropy example, some people don't have gate 1. And so maybe they don't really have it in their sequence to some degree, but everybody hits those states of entropy, everybody, right? And everybody has this gift of freshness that comes from it when they kind of get back up. But they also might have, gate 2, which is the programming partner to it. Or they might have, gate 8, which then connects it and makes a full channel with it. So there's all different kinds of ways that it could be showing up. And like, oh, you actually have a little bit of conditioning around this versus this is your gate and this is the one you should only be paying attention to. I like the sequences. I love the structure of human design and for gene keys, but also I feel like it's so much more fluid than that. And I don't like to feel restricted with what I'm going to be bringing up, but I love it to integrate into where that person is and to be able to hold them so fully so that when they walk away from that session, they're like, oh my God, I understand what this energy means now. And then maybe they'll go back and look at their chart and read about it or do whatever. But it sets kind of this foundational tone for you have every single one of these energies, which one is showing up to play with and why. And let's look at it from that perspective.
I appreciate that. I think that's really refreshing in a way, because like, I think a lot of times people will find out about the gene keys or about human design, and the first step is like they want to know what their gene keys are. They want to know what their human design is. But it's kind of like, when we learn about our astrology chart, we want to know what our chart looks like. But understanding the entire system is about understanding like all of who we are and all of our humanness. And so I think that the way that you're utilizing it as a tool to go along with the beautiful coaching that you already do, because I've experienced that. I can just imagine how this is like, in a way, it's like an enhancement. It's like an added language. It's a language that you now speak that you're able to help others use in this beautiful way as a tool, that goes alongside the work that you've already been doing with helping people with transmuting these shadow experiences into something that they can understand more deeply and they can learn to trust the experience they're having instead of running away, like most of us do.
It's so beautifully put, because I think when we find out a lot of this information, you can attest to this, it can take up to 7 years to fully understand your chart. Like there's so much information there, and it is can be overwhelming. It can feel like your brain is trying to find answers. So it's almost going for like an information overload and like, I need to learn every single aspect of this and like make sure that I understand it. And we do that to get away from what we're actually feeling. And so if we can break it down to a much more tangible little bite of information that applies to where you are in your current moment, it's so much easier to integrate it and to fully take that from your experience.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I really love the way that you're using this in your practice and in your personal world. I feel that from you. It's such a beautiful system, and I think that you're utilizing it in a really unique and beautiful way. So thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today about your process, about, these living examples of what we're going through and how we can start, being with those shadow experiences and noticing what kind of wisdom they have. People are curious about working with you or want to know more about your work. Where can they connect with you? Where can they find you?
Oh, great question. So as of right now, I don't really have any other way other than on Instagram right now. So I really love Instagram. It's such a beautiful way. I think my handle, I had to look it up. It's Krysta.Kinslow. So it's KRYSTA.KINSLOW. And I've got a few different ways that you connect on there. I love messages. If anybody's ever curious and they just want to have a conversation or, meet up together to kind of talk about this a little bit more, I love that as well. So you can reach out in any way on there. I'll also have a few links that you can join if you want to schedule something. So I'll have that up and ready to go.
Great. So check the show notes, and I highly recommend Krysta as a coach, as an energy alignment guide. I got to work with her quite extensively last year, and it was life-changing and amazing. And I absolutely love the way she's taken both the somatic work that I did with her and the gene keys, and you've just you really integrated it into your being, and I can feel that. I can see that from you.
I just love that. Thank you so much for saying that. I was just thinking back, and I know we've got to jump off here pretty soon, but I was just thinking back to one of our first somatic sessions together, actually, with you, and just all of the emotion that moved through me by you just having me do a couple of tiny, simple moves. And I think about this all the time of just how much must have been pent up in my system that, again, tried to find all the logical reasonings of why it might be there and all the things. And you've been such a special human in my world with the way that we've been able to kind of complement one another's growth, and how much space you held for my traumatic experiences to move through my body and to come out in just a wave of emotion. And it kind of set me off on this course to kind of deepen my understanding of a lot of this. So I just also want to thank you and just send you so much love for just being in my world and being such a big catalyst for all of this change for me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, well, I'm so happy we got to share this conversation with everybody, because I love our conversations.
Me too.
Share them with other people and they get to enjoy them too. So yes, we'll have another one. We'll have you come on a little bit later, maybe this season or next season, and share more about what you're up to. Because I just adore you.
I would love that. I adore you too. This has been such a gift today. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've been listening to the Free Your Soma podcast. To find out more information about today's guest, check the show notes. And to find out more information about me, Amy Takaya, and the Radiance program, visit www.freeyoursoma.com.
Hey there, truth seeker, freedom lover, consciousness expander. You've been listening to the Free Your Soma podcast. I'm Amy Takaya, and I'd like to invite you on the somatic exploration of a lifetime. Join me for Revive, a 9-week somatic movement adventure. You and an intrepid group of heart-led leaders will learn how to release muscular stress, tension, and pain, and how to come back to ease and flow in your body. What's more, this tension you've been holding in your back, your neck, your shoulders, this represents your untapped somatic potential. When these muscles lengthen out and relax, you will get to experience deeper body intelligence and wisdom throughout your life. Learn more about Revive at www.freeyoursoma.com.